Hi, C here. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make drawstring shorts. These shorts are going to be perfect for summertime. They're super versatile. You can dress them up or dress them down. I'm using 100% linen. You can use any fabric you like, but I would stick to wovens such as cotton, linen, rainy, hemp, things like that. You can also use synthetic like polyester, but I prefer natural fibers, so I tend to stick with those. They're also going to have an attached waistband and pockets. I don't know about you, but I like pockets in any pants I wear. We are also going to be making our own pattern using a pair of shorts that we already own. It's super simple to do, and you can use this technique to make any pattern you want from the clothes you already own, adjust them, and then make something new. I hope you guys liked the video. I'm going to show you the shorts I will be using to make my pattern, and then we'll get on with the video. These are the shorts I am going to be using to trace my pattern. As you can see, they're nice and flowy. They fit really nice. They're comfortable. So this is kind of the look I'm going for. I'm just going to make them a little smaller at the side seam so they don't flare out as much. Back, super simple, comfy little shorts. What we are going to need is whatever shorts you want to use to trace your pattern. Fabric, I'm using 100% linen. Paper to trace onto. Iron-on fusible interfacing. A pencil, your buttonhole attachment. Pins, tailor's chalk, a tape measure, paper cutting scissors, fabric cutting scissors, small thread scissors, a ruler, and you'll also need a safety pin and maybe some tape, your sewing machine, and an ironing board and iron. Section off the right front part of your shorts just like this. You can place pins along the side seam and the inseam because we are going to trace around just this front right panel. Alright, now you simply just trace around that right front panel that you just created for yourself. You don't have to trace the waistband, you can simply just put a notch at the top. Just like that. Now that we have the shorts nice and traced onto our paper, we're going to go ahead and measure our waistband to figure out how many inches we need to add to the side seam. So my waistband was 30 inches long, but I needed to be 38 inches because my hips are 38 inches and I needed it to go around my hips. So I'm adding 8 inches, but since I have 4 pieces, I'm taking 8 divided by 4, which is 2. So that's the number I will be adding to the side seam. I am taking it in 3/8 of an inch at the side seam at the hem. Now that we have our new measurements in place, we are going to go ahead and draw a line from those 2 points that we just made. Now we are going to draw our waistline. So you're going to move the point that you drew earlier from when you traced your shorts out to the new side seam, and then you're simply just going to draw a line from your crotch seam all the way out to your side seam with a little bit of a curve. Now we have our front short pattern done. I'm going to go ahead and add 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around, besides at the bottom where I want to do a 3/4 inch hem. Take a new piece of paper and lay it over your front short pattern and pin it in place. We are going to trace the front piece onto this new piece of paper to create our back short. But you want to go ahead and make sure that you're tracing around the inside line without seam allowance. I am adding 2 inches to my inseam to make my crotch seam longer. I am doing this to accommodate for the shape of my behind, which is bigger than my front. You might want to add more or less depending on your size. our new inseam, we are going to make sure it is the same measurement as our old one. So we are going to measure that and then just put a little notch on your new inseam at that same measurement. And then you're just going to recurve your crotch seam. So you can see this comes down too steep and then goes over at too much of an angle. So simply just redraw that line so it's a nice even curve. You can just eyeball it, but it should look something like this. I'm going to add 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around and 3/4 at the bottom. Now that we have our seam allowance all traced down, I'm going to cut out my front and back short pattern. Alright, our pattern is all ready, so now we are going to add the pocket. To add a pocket, simply just lay your hand down on the right front corner of your short pattern and just draw a line around. And that's going to be the shape of your pocket. So now you want to figure out how big you want your pocket opening to be. I'm going to make mine 2 inches wide at the top. So I'm just going to measure 2 inches, mark that down. And then for the bottom, I want it to be big enough opening to fit my hand. So I'm just like sliding my hand in to see where that point would be and marking it down. And then I'm just going to draw a nice curved line from those 2 points. And that's going to be my pocket opening. We have our pocket done, so take another piece of paper, pin it onto your front short, and go ahead and trace that pocket that you just drew onto your new piece of paper. Okay, so now we've created our under pocket. You can go ahead and move that to the side. And now we are going to add 1/2 inch seam allowance to that line there, our pocket opening. Our under pocket that we just made is going to serve as that piece now, and we are going to sew our pocket facing to that line. That's why we're adding 1/2 inch seam allowance. You can go ahead and add 1/2 inch seam allowance to your under pocket as well. Now you're going to cut out another piece of paper and you're going to put that on top of your pocket and pin it down, and then you're going to trace around the pocket, leaving off the pocket opening. So just like we did on our shorts, we took that part off. We're going to make a pocket piece with that part off as well. And you're just going to add 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around. Okay, now we have our pocket facing and our under pocket done. We are ready to do the waistband. So you're going to measure your back short piece, figure out what that is. Mine was 9 3/8. So since I have 4 pieces, I take 9 3/8 times 4, 37.5. So that's how long I'm going to make my waistband. You're going to take a big piece of paper, draw a straight line all the way across. We are going to square a line up now on the left side of the paper. That's going to be our center back. From that line, you're going to measure over whatever your measurement was. Like I said, mine was 37.5. I put a little notch there. And then from that point, I'm going to measure over 1 inch. I'm doing 1 inch because I want to have a little extra on my waistband just in case. I would rather have too much than too little, so it doesn't hurt to have that. And then from that line, I'm going to add my 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then I'm adding 1/2 inch seam allowance for my bottom line, and then on the left center back as well. Now we are ready to add whatever distance we want our waistband to be. So I'm going to measure and see how big the waistband of the shorts I used for the pattern was. It is 2 inches. So that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to do a 2 inch waistband. So I'm going to measure up 2 inches from our inside line, and I'm just going to draw that all the way across. So now you're going to measure up another 2 inches because we are going to be folding it in half. And then from that line, you can just add a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then you are all done with your waistband. Alright, so now that we have our patterns all done, we are ready to go ahead and cut out our fabric. Since I'm cutting two, I'm going to fold my fabric in half. That way it's easier for me to cut. I can just cut one single piece out, but I'll get two pieces. Makes it a little bit simpler and easier. So you want to make sure that you're cutting on the straight grain. Your straight grain is parallel to your selvage edge. The selvage edge is tightly woven edge of a fabric. It prevents the side edges of the fabric from fraying or raveling. So pretty much on any fabric that you buy from the fabric store, it's going to have one of these, and it'll be indicated by different coloring, numbers, lettering, something of that sort. So you go ahead and pin your paper to your fabric following the selvage edge and straight grain and cut it out. Go ahead and cut out the rest of your pieces. All of them are going to be following the straight grain, just like the first piece that we cut. And I'm going to cut fuse out of my waistband as well. I like to fuse my entire waistband just because it makes it a little bit sturdier, and it just adds a little nice bulkiness to the waistband that I like. You don't necessarily have to do this if you don't want to. Definitely going to want something for where we put the buttonholes, because you're definitely going to want extra structure on that. So definitely do the buttonholes. You don't have to do the entire thing if you don't want to. If you're just going to do the buttonhole, just cut out a small piece and put that right on the center of your waistband. Now we're going to cut out our drawstring piece. So you're going to find your measurement. Mine's 40 by 1.5. I did 1.5 because 3/8 times 4 is 1.5. So my drawstring is going to be 3/8 inches wide. And then the length, I made 40 inches, which is 12 more than my waist. So I'm simply just going to cut out a strip that's 40 by 1.5. Now that we have all of our pieces cut out, I am just going to press them all so they are nice and flat and ready to sew. we sew our pieces, we want to do our seam finish. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a zigzag stitch along all of the seams that I want to be nice and finished. I'm just going to adjust my sheen. I don't really change much. I'm mostly just making the tension a lot bigger. This will just make it so it lays flat, and then I'm going to do a test strip, make sure everything looks good, and this is what a zigzag stitch looks like. It'll be a nice seam finish so our edges don't fray and it stays nice and secure. So I'm going to do this along the crotch seam, the inseam, the hem, and the side seam. I'm going to do that on both the left and right, and then on our front piece, I'm going to do the same thing along the crotch seam, the inseam, the hem, the side seam, and you don't need to do your pocket opening, you can just leave that. We don't need to add any to the pocket facing, you can just leave that, but we are going to do the side seam of our under pocket on both pieces. Now that we have all of our seam finishes done, we're ready to attach our pocket facing to our short. So with the right sides together, you're going to put it right along that pocket opening. It should match perfectly, pin it in place, and sew right at 1/2 inch. Now take your iron and press the seam allowance towards your pocket facing. Once you have that nice and pressed, we are going to edge stitch right along the seam that we just sewed, sewing the seam allowance to the pocket facing. You can go ahead and pin it in place and then just edge stitch right next to the stitch that we just did, sewing the seam allowance to the pocket facing. Doing this will make it so the pocket is really secure. It will stay back towards our pocket facing, and it just really locks everything in place. So now what you're going to do is you're going to trim away your seam allowance about 1/4 inch off. We don't need that much. We want to trim it away because we want it to lay as flat as possible. Pocket kind of curves a little bit, I'm just going to cut out little triangles. This just makes it so on that curved part it will lay really nicely. I kind of always do this. I think it's just like it's a little thing to do, and it really makes a nice difference when you have curves on pocket pieces. Makes it lay really nice and flat and just looks a little bit better. Alright, now I'm just going to press my pocket towards the back so it's nice and flat and ready to go. We are ready to attach our under pocket. So you're going to take your short wrong side facing up, and you're going to take your under pocket wrong side facing up, put it directly down onto your pocket facing and match up the curved edge. Pin that in place, and you are going to sew just the 2 pocket pieces together along the curved edge at 1/2 inch seam allowance. So now we want to sew our pocket facing, our under pocket, and our shorts all together. So you are going to sew at the waistline and the side seam, just at that small part where the pockets are. And you're going to sew at 1/4 of an inch because you want it less than your 1/2 inch because you're going to hide that seam. This is just to like kind of set it in place and keep it steady. So again, just at that small top part and that small side part. Now that we have our pockets sewn on, now what we want to do is we want to do a seam finish around the curve of the pocket. So I'm just going to go to my machine and I'm going to do a zigzag stitch all along that curve. Now that we're done putting our pocket on, we are going to attach our front short and our back short together. So with our right sides facing each other, we are going to sew along the side seam and the inseam at 1/2 inch seam allowance. We have our front and back shorts attached. Now what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to flip them inside out and press open all of your seam allowances. Now that we have our seam allowances nice and pressed open, we are going to attach our 2 short pieces on the crotch seam. So you're going to have one piece wrong side out, one right side out, and you're going to match those up right at the inseam, making sure that line is completely flush. That way it looks nice and clean when you sew it. And you're just going to put a few pins in, and then you're going to put the piece that was right side out inside the leg of the piece that was wrong side out. They should fit in there just perfectly, and then you'll be able to pin right along the curve crotch seam and sew at 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once you're done sewing, you can go ahead and to press open your seam allowance on your crotch seam. Alright, we have our seam allowances nice and pressed open. Now we're ready to work on our waistband. So we're going to put the buttonholes for our drawstring opening. In order to do this, you're going to find the halfway point of your waistband, mark that with tailor's chalk. Once you found that, you can go ahead and mark your 1/2 inch seam allowance at that middle point at the top and the bottom. And then we're going to find our fold line, which is right in the center, mark that. And then from our 1/2 inch seam allowance that we marked to our fold line, we're going to find the middle point there. And then our middle point, we are going to measure over 1/4 inch on both sides. And then from the middle point, you want to make the distance about a 1/2 inch. So I find 1/2 inch that's even on both sides, right in the middle. I mark that. So our buttonhole is going to go between our top and bottom line, right on that line. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to set my buttonholer to the distance I want my buttonholes to be, which is 1/2 inch. So I go ahead and I get that to 1/2 inch, and then I attach it onto my machine, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do one test run to make sure everything's working and looks good. Cut the little holes out because you need an opening. So all you got to do is just fold it in half, snip it a little bit, and then you can cut them open. So we have 2 openings. So you want to attach your waistband with the buttonholes facing up and right sides together. So I'm going to go ahead with right sides together, the buttonholes facing up. I'm going to pin that in place all the way around. So once you get to the back, remember we made our waistband a little bit big, but we want it to meet right up at the center back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the point where both of my pieces meet at center back, and then I'm going to stitch them together at that point at just a straight stitch all the way down. That way when I sew my waistband all the way around, it will be nice and clean and meet right up at that seam. Now that we have our center back for our waistband, we're going to go ahead and trim away all that extra seam that we have. Once you have that trimmed down, you can pin the rest of your waistband to your shorts and then sew all the way around at 1/2 inch seam allowance. Everything meets up, matches good, it's looking good. So now we're ready to trim away our seam allowance. So you don't want 1/2 inch seam allowance on your shorts, you want to trim it to 1/4 inch because you don't want that bulk. So go ahead and trim that away, and then you're going to go to your iron and you're going to press your seam allowance up towards your waistband. This will make it so when we fold our waistband over, the seam allowance will be tucked up and out of our way. Okay, so for our waistband, we are going to be doing a method called stitch in the ditch. So in order to do this, we want to fold the bottom in a little less than our 1/2 inch. So since we have a mark from earlier, you can see that. So go ahead and just fold it in a little less than your 1/2 inch and do that all the way around, and you could just use your iron to fold that in. Okay, now that we have that nice and pressed, we're ready to fold our waistband on the fold line, and that is going to make it so it sits right below our seam. So you can go ahead and pin it in place just like this. I'm pinning from the outside right now, but I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to pin from the other side because that's the side I'm going to be stitching from. I just put a few pins in place. That way it's nice and steady. And when you're pinning, you want to make sure you're pinning it so you're pinning it right below the seam. That way when we stitch it, it will be nice and clean and it will catch it and it will be really nice and good. Alright, now that we have that nice and pinned in place, we are going to do a method called crack stitch or stitch in the ditch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch right in that seam that I already have. So when you do this, it makes it so it's virtually invisible and you can't see it, but you're catching it on the back, making it so the back is super clean. So as you can see, I'm just stitching right in that ditch, right along all the way around. It doesn't have to be perfect, but try your best to get it right in that ditch. Okay, so as you can see, it's right in that ditch there. You can barely see it. I did a pretty good job. I went all the way around, and you can also see, since I'm using white fabric, you can see in the back that I caught the seam. So when I turn it around, you see it's super clean. It looks really nice. This is a really standard way to do waistbands. It's my favorite way to do waistbands. It's pretty much how I always do them. So it's a good thing to know. So now we're gonna press out our strip that we cut for our drawstring. So you're gonna fold both sides in so they meet right in the middle and press that. Once you have that pressed, you're going to fold it in half again and then press it in half. So it should be really clean once you're done. Okay, everything's pressed. So now we want to finish the edges. So what we're going to do is we're simply just going to fold the edge in, and then we're just going to do a straight stitch right along that. So that's going to make it so it's super clean, as you can see. So you're just going to stitch right along there. All right, now that we have that done, with your piece folded in half, you are just going to top stitch right along the edge there to hold it all in place. You're stitching the pieces together. It will be nice and clean, and you can just stitch right along the edge. Alright, so now we have our drawstring all ready to go, but before we do that, we want to make a casing. So in order to make a casing, I'm going to sew 1/2 inch from the bottom and 1/2 inch from the top. That will hit right at the top and the bottom of the buttonholes that we made. So I'm simply just going to top stitch all the way around the waistband, 1/2 inch from the top, 1/2 inch from the bottom. And when you do the 1/2 inch from the bottom, you're going to want to use a ruler since you're not going to be able to use your plate to see how far the measurement is. So you can just take a ruler, line it up, see where it sits, and then follow that all the way around. Okay, now that we have our casing done, we have one thing left to do before putting our drawstring in, which is the hem. So the hem is super simple. We made it 3/4 of an inch. So you're just going to fold it upwards 3/4 of an inch, making sure you do the same distance all the way around, pin it in place, and then I'm going to top stitch from the inside right along the zigzag stitch that we did for our seam finish on the hem.
All right, now that we have our hem all done, we are ready to put our drawstring in. Last step, guys. So I had this nifty little tool. If you don't have one of these, guys, majority of people probably don't. You can just use a safety pin. Attach your safety pin to one end of your drawstring, and then you're going to enter it in. And you want your seam, your stitches, to be facing towards the bottom. So make sure they're towards the bottom and simply just push it in until it's all the way around. A safety pin will work just as well as this tool. I just do this a lot, so I invested in one of these guys. They're like $7 from any of your local, craft stores. I'll link it in the description below. All right, we're all done, guys. We made the perfect little linen shorts.
Here is the final product. I really like how they came out, exactly how I was imagining. They're super comfy, have great pockets. Like I said, I did 100% linen. It's super hot in Hawaii, so I wanted to use really breathable fabric. They look great. And I put all the extra on the waistband to the back just because I like how it looks better, but move it wherever you want. I can move it to the front, create a little detailing here. Yeah, they came out really nice. I really like them. Here's a little full shot. Alright, there we have our perfect little drawstring shorts. I hope you guys liked the video and learned how to do it. Let me know what you think, like, subscribe, comment. I would love to hear your thoughts. Give me recommendations on videos you would like to see. And I can't wait to see you guys next time. Bye!